Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms, firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about right here on Coffee with Craig. So take a moment, like and share the program, and let your friends do the same, or encourage them to do the same. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You know, a lot of you folks, I know you guys are watching us, maybe watching us for the first time. If you like what you see, subscribe. Also, if you're watching us on Facebook, you can follow us, as well as you're going to have to hit the notification button. And then in both cases, you will get notifications whenever we go live. So it's the best way to join the conversation as it's happening. Also, please take a moment to go to fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. It is a cool place to go to get all sorts of pro-Second Amendment gear. T-shirts, coffee mugs, hoodies, all sorts of stuff showing your support for the Second Amendment. Know that every dollar that you spend will go right back into the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment, and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. All right. Well, the fight for our right to keep and bear arms has taken an interesting hit as of late. You may or may not know that H.R. 8, the Bi-Partisan Background Checks Act of 2019, has passed the House of Representatives. That's right. It's passed the House of Representatives. Now, keep in mind, this is a measure that would require background checks for all firearms purchases, not just those, or transfers, not just where you're purchasing a firearm from a licensed dealer, but if you're doing a private sale, whatever it is, every firearms transaction would require you to do a background check. Now, we all know that this isn't about background checks. This is because they want a registry. They want to register your firearm. They want to know what guns you have, and that's what this is all about. So that should a time come where they decide they no longer wish for you to have firearms, they'll know exactly where to go to get them. But the interesting thing about this bill, because we all know now this measure is going to go. It's going to go over to the Senate. This bill should not get past the Senate. If it does somehow, by some miracle, get past the Senate, well, then it'll go to President Trump, who has already said that he's against this notion and against this idea. So we shall see. Anyway, but the main thing I wanted to show you was, and the reason why I believe it may have a shot in the Senate is, well, because notice the name of it, the Bipartisan background checks bill. That means that there were some Republicans who decided that they were going to get behind this particular measure, and I wanted to share with you a list of who those Republicans are. So let's take a look at it. So first, you have these folks who actually helped sponsor the bill. All right, so you've got the Republican sponsors. You've got Representative Peter King out of New York. You've got Representative Brian Fitzpatrick out of Pennsylvania. You've got Brian Mast out of Florida, Fred Upton from Michigan, and Christopher Smith from New Jersey. Now, there were also Republicans who didn't necessarily sponsor it, but they did vote for it, like Vern Buchanan from Michigan, Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida, and William Hurd from Texas. William Hurd from Texas. Something is wrong with this picture. A representative from Texas supporting this measure. Folks, what is going on here when you had Texans, Republicans from Texas? Oh, and Florida. I mean, Florida's pretty darn pro-gun. I mean, you know, they've had their battles and they've had some fights recently, but you've got two representatives from Florida who have actually supported this bill, the idea of quote-unquote universal background checks. Folks, I don't know what it is. These people think that because they have an R after their name, that means that anything they think is pro-gun, that they must, whatever they do, whatever they say must be pro-Second Amendment, because, hey, they are Republican after all. So therefore, we should bow and scrape and be like, okay, well, if you say it's pro-gun, then it must be pro-gun. That is a bunch of hooey. And, you know, in particular for those of you who reside in the states of Texas and Florida, and maybe, okay, we could say Michigan as well, or Pennsylvania. You know, folks, y'all got to stand up to these folks. You need to make sure that these people who call themselves Republicans, who call themselves pro-Second Amendment, but who call themselves Republicans, but are really jackasses in elephant suits. You need to make sure that they know and they understand that if you're going to proclaim to be on our side, if you're going to proclaim to support our values and our civil rights, and then you decide you're going to do the exact opposite and vote against that, that you will be held accountable. Right? Last session, we had like 4 different Republicans vote bad on guns. Guess what? None of them are currently in the California legislature. Go figure. Now, mind you, we are in fact facing a super majority Democrats, but you know what? Republicans need to learn. If you're going to be anti-gun, then what good are you to gun owners? If you want the vote of gun owners, then you need to be pro-Second Amendment. You need to support those bills that support our rights, and you need to oppose those bills that violate our rights. And this, my friends, is one of those bills. Now, there was another measure. This was HB 1112. Now, HB 1112 also had to do with background checks. But what it would do is this. See, normally what happens is there's a certain period of time after they go through the background check. I think it's 3 days. Normally what would happen is if they didn't get back to you, if they would basically, the firearm could then be released by the dealer if it wasn't passed within a certain period of time. This now extends that out to 20 days. So in other words, it's saying that if for some reason the FBI is unable to get the background check done in 20 days, they can still hold or withhold the firearm from you. 20 days. Let me say that again. 20 days. Because the government can't get their act together. Because the FBI, the ATF cannot get their act together, or if they cannot get their act together, well, then the firearm can then be released to the purchaser. Folks, this is just overall, it's just a bad idea. It's a bad idea because, you know, if you have, for example, an anti-gun attorney general, or you have an anti-gun head of the ATF, you have a president who wants to delay these sorts of purchases, they'll make sure that background checks take longer than they should. I wish I could say that you wouldn't have people doing that, but I have absolutely no faith in the anti-gun community. I happen to believe that they would go out of their way to make sure that our right to keep and bear arms would be delayed. So anyway, now this measure, luckily, it was passed on almost partisan. Actually, the interesting thing was the opposition was bipartisan because there were actually 2 Democrats who voted against this measure. Now, both of these measures, H.R. 1112 as well as H.R. 8, are on their way over to the Senate, where they will then where they may or may not get heard. I'm believing that Senator McConnell will make sure that these measures never see the light of day. Having said that, there are at least a few Republicans in the Senate who have demonstrated that they cannot necessarily be counted on all 2A issues. There are some who've demonstrated that they have a penchant for wheeling and dealing, and may or may not be willing to wheel and deal our rights away. So we need to keep an eye on them, and we need to make sure that we get the word out. Let people know what's going on. Let people know how they can make their voice heard. And by the way, if you follow the links in the description of this video, you can make sure you can get your voice out there right now. If you go there right now and you put in an email and you want to send an email, they're all going to the Senate now. All right, so all of your messages now are going to be going to the Senate. So even if you did it before, you can do it again. You should do it again, because now those messages are going to go to the Senate and let them know you need to vote no on these anti-Second Amendment, anti-civil rights bills. No on universal background checks, and no on extending the amount of time that the FBI has to delay your ability to be able to access your legally purchased firearms. It's that simple. Anyway, folks, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing this program. We're only successful because you guys are there. And by the way, one more thing I'll throw in. Please take a moment. Join the Firearms Policy Coalition. There's also a link in the description of this video. If you're not already a member, please make sure you're a member. If you are a member, please make sure that you contribute. We survive as an organization 100% on the contributions that you guys make. We don't have some big Bloomberg donor or some big corporation like Glock or something like that who's kicking us down money. Literally, it is the $10, the $5, the $50 that you folks donate, the $100 maybe, that you guys contribute that make the work that we do possible. So please help us here at the Firearms Policy Coalition, because as you know, we are the home in the fight for civil rights. Gotta use them or you're gonna lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.